Can I just ask you, just purely for my own curiosity, where are you currently? You lived in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm originally from Birmingham in the UK, but I've been in Japan nearly 21 years now.
Okay, so
I'm in
Birmingham,
Tokyo.
you don't have the... Okay, that's cool. You don't have
Birmingham. I can speak like I'm from Birmingham if you want. It's more like it's more of a black country twang because most of my family are from there.
So you can do the Peaky Blinders thing naturally.
That's technically no. The Peaky Blinders will be more Birmingham, slight black country, but Birmingham, yeah. My family's more black country. But I never had that accent, and my accent has only mellowed out even further since being abroad so long. You know, I'm around all sorts of people, so yeah, it's just kind of mellowed. Yeah. But when I go home, it switches back on.
Dude, I mean, I actually did not know that about you. I know you're from Britain, but I lived in London for 4 years. I lived in Manchester for a year. So like I moved a lot as well. I'm not going to bore you with small talk, but I think more importantly for you, I've quote unquote studied under Dr. Ellie Herms and Dr. Mike Zordos during one of my first certifications around like 2013, 2014. And yeah, that's kind of how I started and how I, went on what I feel still is a correct path. So we can also, if you want at any point, we can discuss the state of our industry as well. I don't think you've been talking a lot about that. So maybe that's going to be something interesting for you. I just want to ask you your opinion. I hope this is not a waste of time for you. How do you feel about the state of our current industry? I think on one hand, AI and GLP-1s being so popular has completely changed the landscape of our industry and also how we do business as coaches. I also see and witness in the last maybe decade or so, there's a huge influx of bad actors, of snake oil salesmen. And the only thing that I see that we're trying to kind of push against and counterattack is through good information. I just don't think we're ever going to win this war against charlatans with good information versus bad information. How do you feel about our industry today?
Sure. So people listen to you, Darko, because they trust you and they like you. And people can go to ChatGPT and they can type in certain questions and they can get very detailed answers and they can start a conversation with it. And to an extent, they may feel that they can trust it, and that's good. And the more that you feed it, the more context it has. And you would hope, certainly as these get better, that it gets more context and then the answers get even better and better. The issue then is that, let's say that these algorithms, these chatbots, AI, they can come back with perfect answers. This assumes that information was a problem in the first place, which I don't think it necessarily is. So very often, in fact, most of the time, I think people know what they need to do. It's just they don't want to do it. They haven't reached that point of breaking yet where it means like something real to them if they don't get it sorted. And so they don't do it. They half-ass it and then they start looking for shortcuts. And because our tendency is to look for shortcuts until we're very serious about something, like when you're very serious about something, the level of effort you're prepared to put in is much, much higher, right? Unfortunately, the stuff that works requires effort. Okay? It's gradual. The more extreme you want to take it, the more effort that you need to put in. Hence, bodybuilders, they may need to spend 20 hours on this stuff per week, whereas regular people, they may need to spend only 5. And in that, I'm talking about exercise like a food prep, which includes like shopping, making sure that your kitchen, your food environment is all cleaned up and working in your favor, and cooking and eating, and then trying not to think about all of this stuff for the rest of the time, which is also a trap, right? The problem is that most people aren't even prepared to put in that much effort, but that's because they're not serious about it enough yet. And because it is most, then they're just going to gravitate towards sound bites and shortcuts, which generally get marketed as biohacks or cutting edge information, which is kind of what large, seemingly evidence-based podcasts peddle. Usually someone who has a doctor before their name. So I don't think that's ever going to end. People are always going to gravitate towards ways in which they can spend their way out of putting in the right effort and changing their habits or taking a shortcut. I don't think that will ever end. The one thing that I think people will always want is having a person that they trust in their corner. that they can open up their heart to, trust that they will ask them the right questions and prod in the right way and stay accountable to. Because I don't think we will get to a point where you're going to want to stay accountable to your AI friend. Not unless you set up certain sticks. Sticks being where it can potentially withdraw from your bank account as punishment if you don't follow through. And it's actually able to visibly see if you haven't followed through. And then maybe that could be ramped up by it donating to an anti-charity of yours, and potentially having that made publicly, some kind of public shaming element there. But, short of that, I just don't think there's ever going to be a replacement for wanting to work with a person. So I don't think our industry is necessarily under threat. I do think it is changing. I think it's got the potential to make bad coaches better. I think it is only going to help good coaches do better. You know what? Actually, scrub that last thought. This isn't something I've thought through well enough, so maybe that's not correct, that last one. We could potentially argue that either way, but yeah, those are my kind of off the cuff thoughts on that one.
No, and sorry to just throw you under the bus. I just wanted to hear your thoughts, and I don't think there's anything particularly special or too complex that we need to think about. I think for me it's very straightforward. I agree with you. I will also add one thing that I'm not sure will you agree, but I also think that the existence of AI and GLP-1s as well are going to filter a lot of bad coaches. I think a lot of businesses might just be extinct because they are so reliant on cookie cutter programs, selling PDFs and whatnot, right? And also because of this massive current existence of chatbots and automated emails and automated responses and automated onboarding systems even. And even today, you literally have calls with, people who are not people. And I think because of all of that, we're going to have more demand and more necessity to have what you and I currently have, which is just a normal human interaction. And I truly believe in that. I think the worst threat for our business as coaches, I think we are over that. And I truly do believe that using AI and using also GLP-1s as tools and something beneficial for our clients is going to be extremely helpful for us. As you said, people who haven't yet reached contemplation state are not people that I can unfortunately help. It's not that I'm an asshole and I don't want to help them, but I do get quite a few clients who are not at that phase yet, who are trying to change their lives or have a transformation or lose weight or get a six-pack. But as you said, they're not quite there yet. So I think we're on the same page here. And
can I mention about?
Yeah,
sorry,
absolutely. Go ahead.
On the GLP-1s, I think it's an interesting point you make. So we've long had a policy on Ripped Body, quite a few when taking on clients. If anybody wants to have a look, it's rippedbody.com/coaching. In fact, you told me that you have quite a large female audience. So if any women go on there, you'll see that we don't work with women, which immediately gets people angry until they see the reasons for it, right? So I'm just going to leave that one hanging there and not justify why, just so people can go and have a look at that page. Now, other things you'll see on there in our client criteria. Basically, I'll give you a hint. The more you niche down, the better you get at that niche, the better you're able to serve that clientele, right? The better you get, it's just a nice spiral. Anyway, so another one of the things we have on there is no drugs. So we don't want anyone taking drugs. Now, drugs typically would mean testosterone or anabolic steroids generally, right? So now GLP-1s, also drugs. Okay, does this mean that we consider these things to be bad at Ripped Body or ineffective or inappropriate under all circumstances ever? No. However, just like with the steroids or similarly to the steroids, when someone's decided that they're going to go down a path of taking anabolic steroids, because they are such a shortcut, not with plenty downsides, right? Let's just be aware. But because they're such a shortcut, when someone stalls and they're stuck, which is the point that all of our clients come to us for coaching, let's not forget. Why wouldn't they just blast more gear, right? Well, ultimately they will, because what we're going to ask them to do is quite hard. We're going to work on habit change. We're going to work on food environment change. We're going to work on perhaps some counting skills even, because people mess that up as well. We're going to work on getting them to track different aspects of their progress, perhaps differently than what they've been doing before. Their weight daily averaged. We're going to teach them how to look at their data, how to look at their measurements. We're going to get them to rate their sleep, stress, hunger, and fatigue scores so that we can minimally mess with things, therefore causing the minimal amount of suck possible so that they still get on their path to the result. Whereas the kind of the other approach that most people take, because they don't track things rigorously or they don't know how, is they will slash calories, mainly carbs, dump a bunch of like obvious crap out of their diet. And then when things seem like they stop working, they just cut more food out, right? That's not a data-driven approach. And it just leads to kind of this pit of suffering that they get into, right? And then so people try that method and then they're like, there's another way. There are these drugs, and then they try the drugs. Well, now they haven't kind of tried our way of doing things, which is really the kind of this data-driven, habit-based, very kind of common sense approach. They've kind of skipped over that, so it's not going to appeal to them. Although I do think, like for someone like yourself who don't know your height, but let's say you lost 400 pounds, you're now at 200 pounds. You lost about 200 pounds, right? For someone like yourself, and I take it that you lost this many years ago now, before the GLP-1s were out. If you had tried everything and you could not get a handle on it, right? Your hunger was just absolutely chronic, no matter the habits that you changed, no matter the environmental changes that you made, no matter just all of these things, your hunger and your fatigue levels they were completely off the charts compared with what the normal person experiences in a calorie deficit, and you just couldn't do it. You tried the other way. I absolutely think these medications can be lifesavers for these people. It's just the problem, I think, is because everyone tends towards shortcuts, there are going to be people that reach out to them, or they're told they should be reaching out to them as the first port of call, which I think is just going to lead them into, again, I'm not someone who works with people who take drugs, and so I'm not speaking from experience here, but I would imagine it's just going to lead to the same kind of binge rebound patterns that happen naturally anyway. And that's because they haven't learned these underlying food habits, tracking habits, environmental kind of cleanup strategies, etc.
And I think this is also conducive to everything else that we're going to talk about and everything that we mentioned so far. My biggest takeaway from everything you just mentioned about GLP-1s is that, sure, there are absolutely people who need those drugs. However, there are also people who are just going to use it as a shortcut. And I 100% agree with that. I also love the fact that I've discussed GLP-1s with pretty much all of my guests so far. And one thing that I always mention is this parallel between GLP-1s and anabolic steroids, or testosterone predominantly. There are some people men who just need testosterone replacement therapy. They just need it medically. Since you referred to my story, back in 2009, 2010, if GLP-1s existed, to be honest with you, I would be on them 100%. Now, would I consider that a shortcut? Probably not, because of the entire context of my whole story and how I started. I spent 2 years in a war zone as a 8-year-old child. I was malnourished for almost 2 years. After that, just bad habit after bad habit. I was always bigger, then obese, then morbidly obese throughout my life until my early 20s. So I do believe that us as coaches, we need more education on how to handle these things and how to support clients who are using GLP-1s. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of us, we are not in a position where we have established such huge credibility and huge authority like you did with Ripped Body for so many years now. So sometimes we just have to take people on as clients and do our best to help them navigate through a little bit different issues and struggles when they're using GLP-1s. So I will tell you honestly, I do work with, not a lot, but I do worked also with quite a few people who are using GLP-1s, predominantly on Ozempic or Mounjaro. However, I did have one client who told me exactly, pretty much verbatim, the narrative that you just mentioned, which is he quit coaching. We had a discussion on why, because he had results so far. And he said, why would I pay for coaching when I can pay a fraction of that price? And I lost 60 pounds now with your help. But if I regain 30 pounds in the next 3 months, I'm just going to take Ozempic again. And that's it. I'm just going to get back to this point where I currently am, maybe lose another 10 pounds. So we are 100% on the same page when it comes to that. I would only add that because not every single coach has the policy as you do at Rebody, which I fully support because it also allows you to be 100% in your lane and stick with your scope of practice. For me personally, it's not a minefield because I know how to stick with my scope of practice and I'm not delving into any sort of like medical narratives. But I do also believe that in certain circumstances, GLP-1s can be a remarkable tool and also make our job as coaches more enjoyable and easier in a way that we can now eliminate this massive hurdle of constantly thinking about food and really try to use GLP-1s temporarily as an opportunity to build better habits without constant this idea of food addiction. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm not disagreeing with you. Obviously, you have your own company policy that you abide with. I 100% support that, but I also think that in certain cases, GLP-1s can definitely be useful and helpful for us as coaches as well, especially if people are open to building good habits and changing the lifestyle and focusing a bit more on muscle retention through resistance training, because now they have this pressure, maybe fear of losing muscle, and that gives us opportunity to push them towards the gym, right? So I think there are, but also there's this huge fucking negative, which is celebrities and promoting GLP-1s as if they are, fruit and vegetables, and that's a part that I really hate, and it just goes into a very dark place.
Yeah, what you've said there makes a lot of sense to me, and I think we're in a very fortunate position at Rebody in that, like Subtract, right? We've written very heavily into diet tracking, diet adjustments, manipulating macros, manipulating calories, how to do that in a minimally effective way. And we've been doing that for years. And so we attract people who are really, really interested in that. If someone was much newer to the industry, which doesn't tend to be our clients, but if someone's much, much newer to the industry, very few people look at the content on our site and they get excited by it, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so it's been fine. But I can certainly see that for someone who is, let's say, the average personal trainer working in a gym, they're going to need to learn about these drugs. They're going to need to educate themselves. Like, seriously, they will need to educate themselves about them so that they can help people as they come in and meet them as they come in. Because yes, the clients will come into the gym and typically they'll be coming into the gym for personal training, but they're always going to be asking diet questions, right? So it's going to be relevant. And if you're open to answering those, and I think most people will, well, then you need to educate yourself on them so that you can then give them advice. One small anecdote, if I may.
Sure.
As a friend of mine, Nick, won't mind me mentioning his name, we just had my stag party. So that's a bachelor party for the Americans. This was a couple of weeks ago. And we're
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. We're in a pool. It was a pool holiday. Nick looking fantastic. He's down about 50 pounds. I would say the extra weight that he had, it never really suited him. It had just crept on over the last 10-ish years, as is very common. I asked him how he did it. He said he was on Monjourno. I think I've pronounced that correctly. And I was like, oh, wow. And he said, yeah, I did it over this last year. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And he says, well, I was on it for 3 months. That then helped me develop better habits. And then I came off it and kept those better habits. And I was like,
beautiful.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, exactly what you want, really, isn't it? That's kind of the perfect outcome. So I'm really happy for him. So I'm certainly not down on it.
That's awesome. I also 100% agree what you said in the context of education. I think we needed more. When you look at educators from the evidence-based part of this industry, apart from Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, I don't know anyone that is heavily involved in GLP-1s and education of GLP-1s. And I also like his analogy for people who need it. It's not much different than type 1 diabetics needing insulin. And this is exactly why I think we need more education, more formal education, why we need to, education providers need to update their curriculum as well in this context as well. The number one reason I would say for people using GLP-1s is not getting shredded and getting slimmer. I think for most people is trying to find ways to subdue the hunger and now currently extremely popular term, food noise. Since I started coaching and in my own personal journey, battling hunger and cravings and managing through that has been probably one of the bases of my work as a coach. You mentioned food environment, you mentioned building habits. How do you approach those struggles when you have someone who cannot control their cravings. When you have someone who uses their own like food environment, they're using their own food environment as some sort of a sabotage. What are your advice? Do you have any foundational habits or foundational guidelines on how to start, especially if you take into consideration that a lot of people do struggle within the context of their own family? Not that their family is sabotaging them, but Andy, you know this. You have a father or you have a mom who has like 2-3 children, and they have a busy schedule and they have to cook for the entire family, but the things that they cook for their family is not really in line, is not congruent with their goals. So I hope this question wasn't convoluted, but let's say, how do you approach the issue with the food environment and trying to subdue hunger that way?
Sure, yeah. I'd say first, let's set aside someone who has abnormal food cravings when they get into a calorie deficit. And I mean abnormal. They're not especially lean. They are not in an aggressive calorie deficit. They're just struggling. You can see these people like, actually, no, that's the wrong way to phrase it. Let's put those people aside who have a genuine issue that needs correcting medically. Okay. Let's pop that aside for a second, because I don't think that should ever be anybody's baseline assumption until they've kind of nailed down the basics. And then if they still can't get things going, perhaps even with some accountability from a coach, that's then the time to perhaps reach out to an endo, so a hormone specific doctor. But I think there are many steps to look at before that. So then it kind of comes down to goal setting, expectations around what we can achieve. Because if people think that losing 10 pounds in a month is normal, because that's what they've been taught from the magazines that they see on the shelves. There's a bit of an outdated analogy there, but you know what I'm saying? Magazines on shelves, are they even a thing anymore? Right. But if that's what they're taught by if that's what they're taught by pop culture, then, they need to be really educated about what is realistic here. So expectations, we need to look at food choices. So it's not just about calories, but it's about the types of food that they're eating.
Yes.
Are they foods that's going to keep them full and satiated and energized? Or is it stuff that's just going to, feel good at the time, but then it's just going to leave them feeling hungry? Mm-hmm. Then we want to have a look at their diet. Diet in the sense of how much variety do they have in their diet? What is their environment like?
Yes.
Are they eating out? Are they attempting to succeed in losing weight? And we'll stick with losing weight for now. That's going to be basically the topic, the overriding theme of this conversation, right? Do they struggle? Are they struggling to lose weight, but in the context of having a house that's filled with snacks, a home screen on their phone that has Uber Eats, Grab, all the eats, right? DoorDash, whatever the other apps are, right?
All the eats.
All the eats, yeah. Are they at work and they have an all-you-can-eat canteen there? Is it the expectation that they'll eat out a lot on the weekends? Do they play golf on a Saturday and hit the pub on a Sunday? And the golfing game is more like 18 holes plus 18 beers. And then the pub is just day drinking and then terrible food. Are they in a home where if you don't eat the cooking, let's use the context here of a man comes home, wife's cooked a meal, she loves cooking. If the man does not eat that in the quantity that it's given, it can be seen as a rejection of that love, right? There's all of these things that kind of tie in. And if you can, quote unquote, clean these things up, manage these, do what you can with these things, then that's going to really, really help. And that, I would say, would be the first port of call. So we can break all of these down one by one if you would like, and I can be much more succinct than I currently have been in this conversation if you'd like, Darko.
No, that would be lovely. I just want to mention one thing, and maybe you can just piggyback on that, and then we can do it that way. Since before we started recording this, that I used your personal work and Rip Body as an inspiration on how to do things properly when it comes to coaching. But one of the things that I changed significantly since my start back in 2013-ish, a decade ago, is I'm trying to skew people away from the food volume as the only tactic in how to subdue hunger, and really try to educate them also through my own story of the importance of not having smaller meal for the sake of smaller meals, but trying to fit in as many nutrients as possible into lower calorie meals, which means that I put now a lot of emphasis on micronutrient composition of food. I put more emphasis on fiber, not just having everything be high protein, everything be high volume. So I think that's one of the ways that, so I'm really, really happy that you mentioned that you are putting emphasis also on nutrient variety, which I think is an extremely underplayed tactic in subduing hunger, because when we do that, when we subdue hunger, then we can approach weight loss and resistance training as well with a bit more joy and a bit more optimism and less stress, I believe. So yeah, we can definitely continue with this approach, and I think you have made some excellent points. Whatever the mental structure you have, please go ahead with that.
So goals, number one. Then we'll talk about food choices for improved adherence. Then we'll talk about the power of keeping things simple. Fourth, we'll talk about food environment and managing that. And fifth, we'll talk about organizing family meals. The point here is you're on the diet. Your family aren't on the diet. Don't treat this like they're on the diet as well, right? Let's think about how your goals impact other people and where we can work to minimally impact those others. So the first thing, goals. I can only speak for what well, there is research around this, and it does tend to be mixed, with fast versus slow weight loss. For the types of clients that we work with, this and that is the men, not that really makes a difference here, but they've been training for a while. They have done a lot of good things. They've had a certain amount of success. That may be in their past and they're looking to get back into it. They are willing to do what it takes so they've got high drive. They've got a very strong why, because perhaps they've got a bad blood test result or a warning from their doctor that you need to change. Otherwise, you're not going to be around for little Timmy and Misa, right? Yeah. So they're thinking about their kids there. They're like, oh shit, I really got to, or maybe they bend down and they want to play with the kids, but like their knees ache or whatever. So their mobility is all wrecked. And part of that is because they're carrying 30 pounds too much, etc. Right? So for those people, what I say to them typically is aim for roughly a pound per week of weight loss. So about half a kilo or 0.4 kilos per week of weight loss. Expect that in the first week or two, you're going to achieve more than that, perhaps triple that. That's due to a loss of water, gut content, and glycogen. And then just expect that it's going to be steady when looking at the averages over time. Now, that may seem slow. However, if you look at what 6 months can do there, we're talking around 20 pounds of fat loss. Why not 26? Well, you can't expect yourself to be perfect. Okay, so 20, let's call that 8 to 10 kilos of fat loss. That's a massive difference. And the key here is to do it in a way that you can sustain so that you don't get to the end of your diet or partway through and then you binge and then have a rebound. So I think setting yourself up with realistic goals and realistic views of what progress looks like, I think is a good way to go. You're an extreme because you lost so much weight. I would imagine your rate of weight loss would be much higher than that. And that's okay. But again, you're an extreme here. For the average person here that has not 200 pounds to lose, but more like they think 20, but it's actually more like 35. Yeah. So,
it's like
just more modest rates is what we'd recommend, because then it gives them practice of learning the habits and the actions that they will then need to sustain once they've finished their diet. Because the goal isn't just to lose the weight, it's to be able to sustain it thereafter. So that's kind of step one. I can go into like more why, like, okay, so your fatigue will be more manageable, your brain fog more manageable. You're going to be less of a grumpy goose with your family and friends and colleagues. And all of that is important to sustainability, right? The thing that catches people out is that partway through the diet, let's say they're on a 6-month diet, they're aiming to lose 20 pounds or 10 kilos of fat. They are not going to be perfect for the entire time. I was talking about this with a friend last night. She's entering her first bodybuilding show, not in the bodybuilding category, but that's kind of irrelevant. Like she's doing something really big here, something really hard. I talked to her about the water, gut content, and glycogen gain that she can expect when she makes a mistake, which she will. And the mistake may not look or feel like a mistake, but it will just be that they had different food, perhaps more carbs, perhaps saltier food, more fiber than normal, or they just ate something that didn't agree with them. And they bloat and they gain that water, gut content, and glycogen. Glycogen is carbs stored with water in the muscles. It's a fuel store. It's a good thing. But all of a sudden now you can gain 5-6 pounds, 2-3 kilos more in the case of someone who's larger, like yourself. I'm sure your weight swings were much, much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like you could gain probably 15 pounds over a weekend when you didn't really do anything
Absolutely.
that wrong. Yeah. Yeah. For most
Honestly,
people, it's going to be
I
smaller.
still could.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. It catches people off guard. They then think that they've messed up. This makes them do one of two things usually, and it will be either the F it, I quit, I've messed up, this isn't for me, this doesn't work for me, which is very sad. Or it will be, I need to slash calories even further, this hasn't been working. When
Yes.
actually all they needed to do was keep calm, carry on. The calorie math is they probably only went at most 2,000 calories over, let's say, which is good for slightly over half a pound or a quarter of a kilo of fat regain, which will be gone within half a week anyway. So that's one thing, just kind of expectations there, talking clients around the expectations of what progress really looks like.
Do you see any cases for maybe a more rapid approach followed by a longer maintenance? And I'm going to give you two scenarios. In our fitness industry, we are pressured to provide clients with or help clients get the quickest results as possible initially so that we can have a better client retention so we can work for hopefully longer. Also, there is another scenario which applies to my work with people who struggle with obesity and also morbid obesity. So I'm not sure, do you subscribe to the idea of set point or a settling point? But for someone like me, I would greatly benefited early in my weight loss journey if I maybe lost 20, 30 pounds and then maintained that for a few months even. And this doesn't have to be pseudoscientific for like my metabolism to settle down or whatever. It can be purely mental for me to adjust and adapt to my own new body, right? What are your experiences with that? And do you see any valid points to maybe have a more rapid approach followed by a longer maintenance?
So there's a few different things kind of wrapped up in here. One is more rapid approaches to weight loss. Another one is kind of set point and settling point theory, and whether we can actually change that. Just to briefly kind of double tap on that, set point / settling point. The idea is for a given person, there is going to be a range of body fat. Okay, let's stick with set point. For any given person, there will be a body fat percentage where they will feel normal. And if they try to get any lower than that, they will suffer with hunger, fatigue, brain fog, etc. The idea of settling point, this is as far as I understand it. It's been a long time since I read the technicalities of this. It just kind of makes sense to me. Settling point is that it's not really a single body fat percentage, but more a range of body fat levels. And that range that people will feel comfortable at, you will be lower in the range if you have kind of sorted your food choices, your food environment, your habits, and your environment generally, right? You're around a fit crowd in a sunny town with fit people and you have great friends who are active, right? Stands to reason that you will be on the lower end of the range where you will feel normal, happy, comfortable. Mm-hmm. Whereas if all of those things are against you, the opposites, you're going to be at the higher end of that range. So that's kind of like set point, settling point. So do I think that is a thing? I would say yes. I would say the evidence of that is just, anytime you walk outside, you see that some people are skinnier than others. And you know that like 90% or even more of people aren't trying. They're not actively thinking about it. It's just that their diet, that after 365 days, it's almost a miracle that, 99% of people's body weights are within like 2 or 3 pounds, a kilo or two of what they were the year before without even counting anything. And that's because of our hunger fullness cues combined with environment, etc. So I do think that's very powerful and that's good evidence that this is a thing. Is it a good idea for people to lose weight quickly? I think if that's going to get people buy-in to the process, maybe. They will lose weight more quickly at the start anyway, just because of that water gut content and glycogen thing. That's going to be in the first couple of weeks. You can lean into that with faster rates of weight loss, but I do want to encourage them to always go for what is going to be sustainable over the long term. And if they've had trouble in the past of losing weight too quickly, and I didn't see any issue with kind of the method by which they did it, like they weren't just eating Pop-Tarts and protein shakes while being on 800 calories, right? They were trying to make the most of their food choices there. Then I would probably encourage them not to do it. I'll give you another anecdote. There is a very popular gym chain. I know it's all around the world. I won't name them, but they offer very expensive personal training. It does tend to come with diet advice as well. And at this gym chain, all of the personal trainers have to go through a body transformation every 3 months. The idea of this is that it keeps them on their toes. It keeps the clients look to the personal trainers as the product. That is what they're going for. And it stops them from getting out of shape too much. Now, just a thought, but if they're having to do rapid body transformations every 3 months, is that not evidence of the fact that the method isn't working? You know? And I think there are more people that have a problem with unrealistic expectations for speed of weight loss than there are kind of the opposite. So, you know, it's all got to be personal. It all has to be personal. But kind of the broad teaching position that I want to put across, because so many people find this pitfall with fast rates of weight loss, is that, hey, taking it slow is okay, man. Slow and steady more often will win the race. Yeah, that's kind of my answer there. Again,
No,
not to say that there's no place for it. It's just probably like there's a place for it 20% of the time and 80% not. But again, that's going to depend on demographic. So yeah.
Yeah, I also think it also depends on motivation, because I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people that I work with come to that place where like they have a mental deadline that they need to lose the weight for this particular event or a wedding or summer or getting that beach body, whatever. So that's always, not always, but most of the time, that's also that plays a big role in the entire decision, whether you want to lose fast or slow. And I would say for most people that I work with, those who are embracing slower pace of weight loss are people who tried every diet under the sun, and they tried shortcuts, and they've tried a fast approach and nothing works. And they're kind of like, dude, like, yeah, let's just do it your way. And that's usually where I see most success with clients. Those who tried the fast approach didn't work, and then slow approach actually works.
Cool. Should we move on to the second one, food choices?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
So our approach, I'm the head coach at Rip Body. It was me for many years. And then the last few years, I've started working with Sam and Matt. They've joined the team and they're fantastic. So if I ever say I do mean we as well. We do place a fair amount of importance on food choice. I don't think anybody's first port of call should be calorie counting. I think it should be cutting out the obvious shit that's in your diet. It's not always obvious to them, but I think a checklist of examples can be very helpful for people. So the kinds of things, what do I mean, that can catch people off guard? We had Mayonnaise Man, one of the years, that was in the early days, where he was just forgetting to count the mayonnaise, right? He was counting everything really, really accurately. He was just forgetting his mayonnaise, right? And
Mayonnaise Man.
Yeah, Mayonnaise Man. It's a thing. So we reckon he was having like maybe 300-400 calories of mayonnaise a day. And that was what was doing us out of the deficit. We were scratching our heads for up to 6 weeks. But we figured that one out. There's the guy who has a couple of whiskeys a night to unwind. Mm-hmm. And maybe he is aware of the calories in whiskey, but he logs those as, a single shot of 80 calories. But he's doing a free pour and it's more like 2.5 shots, right? And so he's sinking, maybe 5 shots in an evening. Well, that's the difference between a slight calorie surplus or a decent deficit right there. Okay, maybe you're in the habit of, myself here, having a small, it's kind of like a Magnum, it's called a Palm in Japan, ice cream, not a gun, like after dinner, right? It might be 150 calories, this ice cream. That's one simple thing that I could cut out. My lattes, often people don't think about calories that you drink, right? Other than alcohol even, right? Lattes, swapping that out for a black coffee. Desserts, that kind of thing. Obvious shit that you can cut out. Are you in the habit of just having too many pizzas, too much takeout, too much oily, very fatty food? Let's cut that down. Are you when I say fatty food, like, do you have lots of marbled or kind of fatty cuts of meat? Well, a switch that you could make is to have less fatty cuts of meat in there, because that's going to obviously be very high in calories. Go for leaner cuts of meat. You could potentially have more then, help you reach your protein goals without busting over your calorie numbers. In fact, not that you even necessarily need to be thinking of your specific calorie numbers at this point. And that can then help put you in a calorie deficit. So the first step, really, cut out the obvious. Then the second step is, okay, track that, see how you do. When things start stalling, then take the next step, which is, okay, of the foods what I'm eating, how are they? How would we rank this? Okay, so my typical breakfast is A, B, and C. All right, well, how could we potentially improve or tweak that to keep you more full, right? So let's say someone has cereal for breakfast. Okay, well, what kind of cereal? Let's say they have a yogurt. What kind of yogurt? Can we swap that yogurt for a Greek low-fat or zero-fat yogurt? Right, it's going to be very low in calorie, high in protein, is going to be equally filling. The breakfast cereal, what is that? Is that quite a sugary, easy to eat one? Or could we swap that for something like oats potentially? Not that there's anything particularly magic about oats. It's just that they tend to be a bit more filling, right? And for the same volume, right? So that's one thing. Their lunches or their dinners, do they tend to, I don't know, let's say they're having a nice chicken salad for lunch. When you kind of drill down into what's in there, right, they've got like 2 handfuls of cashews, they've got raisins, they've got, this is my typical salad lunch. I'm outing myself in all of this. I'm not suggesting I'm better than anyone in this, right? There's a handful of cashews, there's a handful of raisins in there. There's a really nice sesame dressing on there that's got a decent amount of fat in, if we're honest. Okay, well, yeah, you've got the good stuff in there, but you're also now adding 250 calories at the end. Perhaps you could cut out half of that. Dinners, etc. So it's kind of a bit of a food audit. And can we push things to be getting you more bang for your buck in terms of the calories? That'd be really the next step, improving food choices for better adherence. The third thing, I think it's an important one, and it comes back to what I said about having, the home screen full of all of the Eats apps, right? There is such a thing, I think, as too much food variety. And what can often happen is people know that they have, let's say, I don't know, a 2,000 calorie diet. That's their target for the day. And then what ends up happening is they end up being on kind of a food hunt. They've got the nutrition logging app, and they've like, okay, well, I've had a banana, and then I've had like a Greek yogurt, and I've had a protein shake. I've had just a little bit of cereal and a splash of like skim milk. Great. Okay. Add all of that up. Okay. 140 calories. Okay, great. Right, I've got math, Andy, math. Right, so I've got 1,560 calories I've got left here. Okay, well, what am I going to have for my lunch? And then they're like, and it just gets overwhelming, or it can get overwhelming for a lot of people because they're trying to fit their old pattern of eating, which was just anything and everything, onto now trying to control their calories, and they get overwhelmed. So one of the things I suggest to many clients is keep your breakfast as one thing if you're going to have your breakfast. Keep your lunch primarily as one thing if you're going to have your lunch. The evening meal, if it is the case that your partner's cooking it and you've got kids in the house, have that evening meal. But have a discussion with your partner and the kids if they're of the appropriate age, right? That you're going to take less from now on and have some other form of protein to bump up your numbers so you're keeping it calorie controlled. You're having the same food. So let's say Monday's lasagna day, Friday's your pizza day, Tuesday is, whatever it is. Most households, they probably have 10 meals on rotation, often many less, right? But we tend to eat the same things over and over again. We fall into a pattern, right? Keep that. Remember, you're on the diet, not them. Just take a smaller portion and then perhaps have a grilled chicken breast on the side and have a smaller portion. And that way you're still able to eat with them. You're still having family time. You're not eating anything. You're still eating the same thing. It's just less with that other bit of protein so that you're still meeting your needs there. And by asking them to kind of, as a base, keep it super simple at the start and minimizing the risk of overwhelm and undercounting. Once they've nailed that, then we add in variety from then as they build the capacity for it and they've got the confidence for it. Cool. Okay, number 4, managing the food environment. So step 1, you need to have the foods in the fridge in the first place, or in the house generally. So you need to plan your shopping. Step 2, at the times where you know you're going to be super stressed and busy, prepare meals in advance so that when you're tired and you want to reach for the easiest thing is the stuff you've already prepared, rather than defaulting to a box of cereal or one of your Eats apps, right? If you know you're going to have a super massively slammed Thursday and Friday back of the week, right? Or actually, let's face it, most people's Monday, Tuesday, they can be quite... On that Sunday, perhaps it's a Sunday morning, perhaps it's a Sunday evening, can you make extra, or can you spend half an hour just preparing that meal then? Just so that when you're busy, stressed, tired, you can just reach for it, stick it in the microwave, and you're good to go, right? That's what I mean about food environment, or one part of it, having the right foods there, preparing. The other part is getting any snacks out of the house that ail you, right? Everyone's got their kryptonite. the thing that they just can't walk past without snacking on it. Remove that from the house if you can. If you can't, if you legitimately can't, which can be the case when you have kids and it's not something that you can remove without kind of causing a lot of drama. Okay, well, then what you can do is put them out of sight. So instead of being on a shelf, they should be in a cabinet. In the cabinet, perhaps at the back of the cabinet. Perhaps it could be at the back of the cabinet in an opaque Tupperware container so that you're not seeing it and therefore teasing yourself all the time. And then so it's this James Clear principle of adding friction to the habits that you're trying to discourage and greasing things for the habits that you're trying to encourage. So what else could we do? We could put a bowl of fruit on the kitchen counter that you're going to walk past on your way to go and snack in the cupboard, where you've got to open the cupboard and then open that, reach up, grab that Tupperware container that's opaque, open it, undo maybe a Ziploc bag as well, right? You're just adding this friction in. It's not impossible, but just adding small amounts of friction in can be very powerful. So that's what I mean about tightening up your food environment. The kind of the third part of this is auditing your friendships and your kind of social circle and just thinking whether any of these are doing you in. So I mentioned about, the 18 rounds, 18 holes and 18 pints. That's a thing. Maybe not so extreme, but the pub culture in the UK to drink on a Sunday, certainly in a pub garden on a sunny Sunday. That's a thing that easily leads to just drinking on a Sunday inside the pub as a habit, because it's how you bond with your mates. And it's like, well, if you're drinking like 4,000 calories of alcohol and then having a couple of pub meals, so like you're going to be undoing everything in a single day. You have to question whether you can actually be successful and still continue to do that. Probably not, unfortunately. And then you need to ask yourself, okay, well, do I now need to make some new friends? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
I agree,
right?
actually. Yeah.
It's rough, but like you're not going to be able to go into that environment and expect yourself to be successful by just having water or a Diet Coke. Your friends are just not, they're not going to allow it in most people's social circles, right? Unfortunately, that can be the reality. And if you do have those type of friends, then of course they can stay your friends. You just can't be joining in those activities, right? You need to, I don't know what it might be. Find a hiking club that you then go and do on a Sunday, or just something different so that you're knocking out that big thing that is just murdering your progress in your life, right? That could be easily the biggest lever that some people could pull, but emotionally it's too hard to pull it. But that is the cost of stopping yourself on this slow decline into oblivion.
Yeah, I love that, because food environment starts at the grocery store. Then we try to expose ourselves to healthy foods around the household. For people who are forgetting to drink water because they're busy or occupied, I tell them to strategically place bottles of water within the areas of their household where they spend most time. And obviously, I do recommend doing their best to at least modify their social environment as well. And Andy, the spotlight is yours again. Let's move on to number 5.
Yeah, number 5 was organizing those family meals so that you don't interfere with their family life. But I already covered it. So okay, really, cool. that was the other main point. Again, just to repeat, because repetition is powerful. You were on the diet, not them. Don't expect them to bend to all of your new changes that you're making. Explain to them what you're doing, why it's important to you, and how you are going to make it minimally impact their lives. That they can expect there to be a few changes that you'll be making, right? Get them on board, have that discussion with them, bring them into your circle. And let's say the kids are young, right? And they are, they're not old enough for you to have this conversation with them, but perhaps they're old enough where you can use them you can weaponize them against yourself. You could turn it into, okay, well, if daddy or mommy is caught snacking, right? Then she dobs in, your kids get to dob you in, right, to the other partner. And then, I don't know, they get 5 more minutes of getting to play on the Nintendo Switch or whatever it is, right? Or, just something that will really motivate them and kind
That's
of
help
gamify things, right? So,
yeah, I think that's one of the most underutilized aspects of successful long-term weight loss and maintenance of lost weight is having that honest, open, sometimes even vulnerable conversation with family members where you don't have to follow what I do, but maybe I can't even do this without your help, without your support. So just trying to motivate them to kind of help you out. I think that's it's a very, very important aspect. Otherwise, there is a lot of friction. There is a lot of frustration that can be involved there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, those were the five. Those are the five main things.
Mhm.
I had written down here scheduling. If you do have a problem of actually getting your training in, then it is really going to be a case of, okay, auditing your schedule, putting it in your schedule, making time for it. Because if we don't, then often the time can just slip by. And for a lot of our clients, doing it first thing in the morning is the only way, because at the end of the day, it's just not realistic, because they're kind of the motivation has gone. By the end of the day, they're quite tired. The other thing is, if they wake up early, get their training in, it also sets them up in the right mental state to win the rest of the day. They've started with a win that often carries over into their diet decisions later in the day as well. So the key to that, of course, is getting to bed at a sensible time. Right? It starts with that pre-habit, right, that enables the habit that we want. Kind of like, the habit that we want is eating better at home. Okay, well, the pre-habit is making sure that we're shopping for the right things when we're in the grocery store.
Man, that's beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Morgan, a person who in the last 15 years has built an extremely successful business based on nonsensical approach, extremely sensible approach when it comes to evidence-based coaching. Literally, there's not a single thing that I have ever read, seen, or heard from you that is bullshit. And yeah, man, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being also an inspiration and an educator for us coaches as well. Your books that I see behind you, they essentially represent almost like textbooks for us coaches, and they are extremely useful, almost like manuals. Sometimes they can even serve as substitution for coaching for people who cannot afford coaching. So I would highly recommend the pyramids. I will link them in every single piece of content that I released. I just want to ask you, beyond ripbody.com, where else people can reach you, and does your team have any current coaching openings for people who are interested?
日本語の話せる方は athletebody.jp で連絡してください。But for those who don't speak Japanese, it is just going to be Ripped Body. I don't really post much on Instagram. You can find everything there. All the links are there, to the podcast, to the YouTube. There's no link that you can't find on there. Yeah, so that just one thing, one course of action, ripbody.com. And if they're not thoroughly bored of me by now, and they do want a little bit more, the one gift that I can give them that may help them, it's that 15-day Kickstart course that we have. It's an email a day guiding them through nutrition setup and training setup and what to expect of those things, how to do them and what to expect, and then avoiding the most common mistakes in nutrition setup and training setup. And that's an email a day delivered over 15 days, along with some training programs and a free nutrition setup guidebook. A lot of people like that and have benefited from that. That's kind of a muscle and strength pyramids light, so to speak.
Andy, I'm speechless for you giving me so much of your time. I'm a big fan, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for doing this. By the way, your Japanese is fucking amazing, man. For me, always was and always will be the most beautiful language that a human can speak. It really is. Since I was a kid and my grandfather hooked me on Kurosawa's movies, I am a huge fan of Japanese language. So thank you for that. Thank you for that as well. That was fan service for me. Andy, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Darko, and thank you to everyone who's been listening to this. I hope you find it helpful.
You're the best, man.